You are not family anymore. My daughter-in-law spat at me on Christmas Eve, her manicured finger pointing toward the door. I walked out into the biting Colorado snow with empty hands, leaving behind the warmth of the roast dinner I was not welcome to eat. They thought they were discarding a burden, but as I navigated the icy steps, I realized I was the one finally letting go. They wanted my silence, but they would get my justice instead. My name is Margaret Rowan, though most people just call me Maggie. At 63 years old, I thought I knew what cold felt like. I had spent decades working in unheated warehouses and driving trucks through blizzards to put food on the table. But as I stepped into the foyer of my son's house in Brookside, Colorado, I realized I had never truly known a chill until tonight. The air inside smelled of expensive cinnamon candles and indifference. I wiped my boots on the mat, careful not to track slush onto the pristine marble floors. The house was magnificent, a testament to Jacob's rise as a manager at West River Connect. It was decorated to perfection with white garlands and silver baubles. Yet, as I scanned the hallway, I felt a familiar ache. There were gallery walls filled with framed photos of Jacob, his wife Kayla, and my grandson Mason. There were pictures of their ski trip to Aspen and their summer in the Hamptons. But there was not a single photo of me. It was as if I had been erased from the narrative before I even died. Kayla approached me, wiping her hands on a linen napkin. She wore a red silk dress that looked like it cost more than my car. "Maggie," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "You are late. We were about to start without you." The roads were slick. "Kayla," I replied, clutching the container of homemade cookies I had brought. She took them from me with 2 fingers, as if they were contaminated, and set them on a side table without a word. Dinner was an exercise in isolation. We sat around a table set with crystal and china, eating roast chicken that was perfectly cooked but tasted like cardboard in my mouth. Jacob talked endlessly about quarterly targets and fiber optic expansions. Kayla nodded, adding comments about her country club committee. Not once did they ask about my health. Not once did they ask how I was managing alone in the old house in Northwood since the furnace started acting up. Then, the silence broke in the worst possible way. Mason, 17 and scrolling on his phone under the table, looked up with bored curiosity. "Hey, Grandma," he said, stuffing a forkful of potatoes into his mouth. "When are you moving into that nursing home, the one Mom and Dad were talking about?" The clatter of silverware stopped instantly. The room went dead silent. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful, erratic rhythm. Mason Kayla snapped, her eyes wide. "We do not talk about private matters at the table." I looked at my son. "Jacob, what is he talking about?" Jacob adjusted his tie, refusing to meet my gaze. He looked like a guilty child wearing a man's suit. "It is complicated. Mum, we just want a safe future for you. That house is an asset, sure, but the upkeep is drowning you. We have been running the numbers. If we sell it now—" "Sell my house?" I whispered. Kayla stood up abruptly, her chair scraping harsh against the floor. She did not look embarrassed anymore. She looked determined. "Actually, let us skip the pleasantries," Kayla said, her voice dropping to a register that was soft but cut deep. "Since we are clearing the air, Jacob and I have made a decision. This holiday is too stressful. Starting next year, Christmas will just be for the family that actually lives under this roof." I stared at her, unable to comprehend the cruelty. "I beg your pardon?" You are not family anymore, Kayla said, pointing a manicured finger right at my face. You are a liability. You are a financial and emotional burden. You are just heavy. Maggie, you are not a relative. You are an obligation we are done fulfilling. I turned to Jacob, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to remember who paid for his college, who bought him his first suit, who held him when he cried. He just took a sip of his wine and looked at the wall. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud break, but a quiet, final severance. I stood up, my old joints popping. I placed the small, wrapped gift cards I had bought for them on the table. "Juk," I said, my voice dry as dust. "You just gave me back my life." I turned and walked out. I did not wait for an apology that would never come. I pushed open the heavy front door and stepped out into the biting wind. The festive jazz music from inside faded as the door clicked shut. I was alone in the dark, shivering in my thin wool coat. You are not family anymore. The words looped in my mind. Fine. If I was not family, then my money was not family money. They thought I was a senile old woman they could put out to pasture. They had no idea who they had just declared war on. I marched toward the driveway, blinded by tears and rage. My boot hit a patch of black ice on the walkway. I tried to correct my balance, but it was too late. My feet flew out from under me. I hit the concrete steps hard, my head cracking against the stone. Pain exploded behind my eyes. The twinkling Christmas lights on the eaves above blurred into streaks of bloody red and sickly green, as the cold seeped into my bones and the world faded to black. I knew the compliant, self-sacrificing mother was gone. Someone else was about to wake up in her place. I woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of a machine that sounded far too cheerful for a hospital room. My head throbbed with a dull, heavy ache, and when I tried to lift my arm, a sharp pain shot through my wrist. It was wrapped in thick gauze. "Mrs. Rowan, can you hear me?" a doctor asked, shining a penlight into my eyes. "You took quite a spill. You have a minor concussion and some bruising, but we need to keep you for observation due to your history of high blood pressure." I wanted to answer, but my tongue felt like lead. I closed my eyes, and suddenly, the sterile white of the hospital room faded into the grey gloom of a loading dock from 30 years ago. I was back in the freezing cold of the warehouse, my breath puffing out in white clouds. I was in my late 20s then, wearing a coat that was too thin for the winter but all I could afford. I remembered the foreman's face, red and impatient, as he handed me my final slip. I had been working the night shift at a logistics company, lifting crates that weighed more than I did, all while carrying Jacob in my belly. My husband, Daniel, had died in a construction accident just 4 months prior, leaving me with nothing but grief and a stack of unpaid bills. "We need someone faster." "Maggie," the foreman had said, not even looking me in the eye. "Go home and rest." But I did not rest. I could not afford to. The memory shifted. I saw myself standing in front of a beat-up delivery truck I had bought on an installment plan that terrified me. I painted Rowan Route Services on the side by hand. I drove that truck through rain, sleet, and snow, hauling cargo when no one else would. I remembered the truck stops where men with grease under their fingernails would look at me and laugh. "Hey, sweetheart." One of them had sneered over his coffee. "You lost. The kitchen is back that way." I never answered them. I let my silence be my armor. I learned to change a tire in a blizzard. I learned to sleep for 3 hours in the cabin and wake up the second my alarm buzzed. I built my reputation on one thing: absolute punctuality. While the men were laughing, I was signing contracts. I secured a deal with Silver Prairie Foods, a processing plant that needed reliable transport. That contract changed everything. 1 truck became 2, then 5. I spent 25 years building that company from the ground up, turning diesel fumes and sleepless nights into a small empire. When I finally sold it, the check was large enough to ensure I would never be cold again. Yet, as I lay in the hospital bed, a bitter realization washed over me. Jacob never knew about the nights I spent crying in that truck cabin. He grew up believing that our comfort came from an insurance payout from Daniel's accident, or just sheer luck. I never corrected him. I was too proud, or perhaps too ashamed of my rough hands, to tell him that his mother was a trucker. I remembered a Christmas morning when Jacob was 7. He had written a letter to Santa, leaving it by the fireplace. Thank you, Santa. And thank you, Daddy in heaven, for the new bike. He did not mention me. I had stood in the doorway, holding the dish towel, and swallowed the lump in my throat. I let him have his hero father. The sound of hushed voices on the other side of the privacy curtain pulled me back to the present. She cannot go back to that house. Jacob, Kayla's voice hissed. It is irresponsible. The doctor said she has blood pressure issues. This fall proves she is declining. I know, Jacob replied, his voice low and placating. I already called Pinewood Serenity Care. They have a bed opening up next week. We just need to get power of attorney sorted out. We cannot let her keep driving and managing her own finances. She is obviously confused. I lay perfectly still, staring at the tiled ceiling. My confusion had built a company. My declining mind had managed payrolls and logistics for 2 decades. I had broken my back to ensure Jacob never had to work a manual labor job in his life. I had traded my youth, my sleep, and my bones to become what I was today. And to them, I was just a wallet with a heartbeat. I felt a tear slide down my temple, hot and angry. They wanted to put me in Pinewood and sell my home. They wanted to strip me of the last dignity I had earning. I looked at my bruised wrist, then up at the sterile ceiling. A cold clarity replaced the throbbing pain in my head. If they have already stripped me of the title of mother, I thought, the darkness in my mind swirling, then why am I still keeping them in the role of heirs? The night shift nurse was a woman named Olivia. She was a tall, sturdy woman of about 40, with kind eyes and hands that moved with the efficiency of someone who had raised children and worked double shifts her whole life. Unlike the doctors who spoke over me as if I were a piece of furniture, Olivia looked me dead in the eye. Mrs. Rowan, she said, adjusting my IV drip. You are awake. Good. I need you to drink some water. Thank you. Olivia, I said, my voice raspy. She paused, looking toward the door to ensure it was closed. Then she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Listen to me, she said. Your son. He was here earlier. He was asking the doctor a lot of questions, not just about your head injury. My stomach tightened. What kind of questions he wanted to know about long-term medical power of attorney? Olivia said, her expression serious. And he kept asking if you were currently lucid enough to sign legal documents regarding your finances. The doctor told him to wait. But you need to know. A chill that had nothing to do with the hospital air conditioning settled over me. Could you hand me my purse? Please. It is in the closet. Olivia nodded and retrieved my battered leather handbag. I thanked her, and once she left the room to answer a call button, I opened it with trembling fingers. My wallet was there. My phone was there. My car keys were there. But the small, brass key that I kept in the zippered side pocket was gone. It was the key to the fireproof safe in my bedroom closet, the safe where I kept the deed to my house, my life insurance policy, and the bonds I had purchased years ago. I grabbed my phone, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I unlocked the screen and opened my email. There it was, a security alert from my bank. Login detected from a new device at 10:30 at night on December 24th. I had been in the ambulance at 10:30. I had been unconscious. I lowered the phone, my breath hitching in my throat. I remembered a conversation from 3 months ago. Kayla had sat at my kitchen table, sipping tea, and said, "Maggie, you really should let me help you set up online banking properly. It is so much safer than paper checks. I can manage the passwords for you." I had thought she was being helpful. Now I realized she was just paving the road. An hour later, Jacob arrived. He walked in with a grim expression, carrying a cup of coffee. He sat in the chair beside my bed, sighing heavily. "Mum," he said, rubbing his face. "We need to talk about logistics. The hospital bills are going to be astronomical. And your insurance, well, it is not great. We really need to discuss selling the Northwood house before the market cools down any further. It is the only way to cover your care." I looked at him, searching for the little boy who used to bring me dandelions. I found only a stranger in a suit. "Jacob," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Where is my safe key?" He blinked, and for a split second, his eyes shifted to the left. "What key? I do not know what you are talking about." "Mom, you are confused. That happens with head injuries." "I am not confused," I said. "Rest." "Mom," he said, standing up abruptly. "I need to take a call." He walked out of the room, but he did not go far enough. He stopped just outside the door, assuming I was asleep or too addled to listen. I closed my eyes and slowed my breathing, straining my ears. "Yes. This is Jacob Rowan," I heard him say. "I am returning the call from Redstone Family Advisors." "Yes, regarding the guardianship petition. My mother. She is showing significant signs of dementia. She is paranoid. We need to protect the assets before she gives them to some scammer." "Yes. I understand the fee." My eyes snapped open. The ceiling tiles blurred as tears welled up. But I refused to let them fall. "You are not family anymore." Kayla's words on Christmas Eve had not been an emotional outburst. They had been a slip of the tongue, a premature victory lap. They had planned this. They had discussed it. They did not just want to cut me out of their lives. They wanted to strip mine for parts. Olivia came back in a few minutes later to check my vitals. She took one look at my face and stopped. She did not ask what was wrong. She knew. She had likely seen this story play out 100 times in these hallways. "You have rights, Mrs. Rowan," she said softly, pretending to check the monitor. "But you need someone on your side who is not related to you by blood." She reached into her pocket and slid a small, plain business card under my pillow. "She is a friend of mine from school," Olivia whispered. "She is a freelance lawyer. She is tough, and she hates bullies." I nodded imperceptibly. "Thank you." That night, long after visiting hours were over and the hospital was quiet save for the distant hum of the elevator. I pulled the card out. Nina Alvarez, attorney at law. I dialed the number with a shaking hand. It rang 4 times before a sleepy voice answered. "Hello, this is Nina. I am sorry to call so late," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. "My name is Margaret Rowan. I am at Brookside General. My son. He thinks I am losing my mind. But I am not." I took a deep breath, gripping the phone tight enough to turn my knuckles white. "They think they can take everything from me," I said into the darkness. "I need to rewrite everything. Right now." Nina Alvarez arrived at my hospital room at 8 o'clock the next morning. She did not look like the high-priced sharks Jacob likely hired. She wore a simple navy blazer over a t-shirt and carried a worn leather satchel. She worked for a small firm called Ember and Lane Legal, but the most important thing about her was her eyes. When she looked at me, she did not see a senile old woman or a paycheck. She saw a client. "Good morning, Mrs. Rowan," she said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "Olivia told me you needed someone to stop a train wreck. Why don't we see if you are fit to drive the train first?" She wasted no time. For the next 20 minutes, she ran me through a gauntlet of questions. She asked about current events, complex math, and the details of my medical history. I answered every single one without faltering. Nina sat back, tapping a stylus against her tablet. A small smile touched her lips. "Well, Maggie, you are sharper than most of my 40-year-old clients. Legally, you are sound. Now, tell me what we are protecting." I took a deep breath and laid it all out. I told her about the sale of Rowan Route Services, the trucking company I had built from nothing. I told her about the house in Northwood that I owned free and clear. I detailed the investment accounts I had grown over 3 decades. And then, with a heavy heart, I told her about my current will. It left every single penny to Jacob. "It feels like I signed my own death warrant," I said, my voice trembling slightly. Nina frowned and started typing furiously on her tablet. Her fingers flew across the screen. After a moment, her face hardened. "I have access to the public docket filings," Nina said, her voice low. "Your instincts were right. Jacob has retained Redstone family advisors. They filed a petition for emergency temporary guardianship this morning. The filing claims you are suffering from rapid onset dementia and are at high risk of financial exploitation." My blood ran cold. They were not just talking about it. They were doing it. "We have to move fast," Nina said, the casual demeanor vanishing. "I need to get an independent psychiatrist in here today to certify your capacity. We need to revoke that will, and we need to lock down your bank accounts before the court grants any temporary orders." "No," I said, a sudden idea forming in my mind. It was dangerous, but it felt right. If I just change the air, he will contest it for years. He will say I was manipulated. I need to put the money somewhere he cannot touch, somewhere it means something. I looked at Nina. I do not want to just leave it to a different person. I want to create a foundation, a trust for elderly women who have been abandoned by their families. Women like the ones Olivia tells me about. Women like me. Nina paused, her pen hovering over the screen. "Maggie, that is a nuclear option. If you disinherit your only son for a charity, he and his wife will go scorched earth. They will drag your name through the mud. They will call you insane in every court in Colorado." "Let them," I said, my voice hard. They told me on Christmas Eve that I am not family. They said I am a liability. If I am not family, then I do not owe them a legacy. Just then, Olivia came in to check my vitals. She nodded at Nina, then looked at me with a sad expression. I just came from room 302, Olivia said quietly. Mrs. Henderson? Her son just sold her house while she was in surgery. He told her she has nowhere else to go but a state facility. She is devastated. That sealed it. I was not going to be Mrs. Henderson. Do it. Nina? I commanded. Draft the papers. We will call it the Long Road Foundation. Okay? Nina said, her eyes gleaming with a fighter's spirit. Here is the strategy. We let Jacob think his guardianship plan is sailing through. We do not fight him openly yet. We let him get confident. Meanwhile, I will file the revocation of all power of attorney documents and register the foundation. By the time he realizes the locks have been changed, the money will already be gone. We spent the next 2 hours plotting. It felt like organizing a heist, but the loot was my own life. When Nina finally left to file the paperwork, I felt a strange sense of calm. I walked into the small ensuite bathroom and looked in the mirror. My face was pale, and the hospital gown was unflattering. I reached up and slowly peeled the bandage off my forehead. The skin underneath was bruised and angry, stitched together with black thread. I stared at my reflection. I looked old. I looked tired. But for the first time in years, I did not look like a victim. You want me to disappear? I whispered to the empty room, my reflection staring back with eyes of steel. Fine. I will disappear. But the money, that stays with me. I was discharged 3 days earlier than expected, but Jacob did not take me home. Instead, his SUV pulled up to the circular driveway of Pinewood Serenity Care. He turned to me, offering a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. This is just temporary. Mum, he said, patting my hand as if I were a frightened child. Just until we get the house sorted and you are back on your feet? I nodded slowly, keeping my eyes wide and vacant. Okay. Jacob, whatever you say. Inside, I did not feel like a victim being incarcerated. As the automatic doors slid open, releasing a blast of air that smelled of industrial lemon cleaner and boiled cabbage, I felt like an operative crossing into enemy territory. I shuffled behind the intake nurse, my grip on my walker intentionally loose, while my eyes catalogued everything: the exits, the staffing schedules on the wall, and the location of the administrative offices. Pinewood was a warehouse for the forgotten. In the common room, where the volume of a game show on the television was turned up to a deafening level, I met my new platoon. There was Nora, a retired history teacher with eyes sharp as flint, over a cup of lukewarm tea. She told me her story. My daughter sold my bungalow 3 months ago. She said she needed to consolidate debts. Now I sleep in a twin bed next to a woman who screams at invisible cats all night. Then there was June, a former nurse who had spent 40 years caring for others. She sat by the window, clutching a phone that never rang. My son cancelled my plan, she whispered, staring at the black screen. He said I was making too many confusing calls to his office. Their stories were fuel for the fire burning in my chest. I realized my plan could not just be about spite. It had to be about rescue. Nina arrived the next afternoon. We huddled in the corner of the cafeteria, pretending to look at a photo album. Instead, she slid a thick document across the table. The Long Road Foundation for Women. Nina said softly. It is official. You are the honorary director. You decide where the first allocation goes. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal. It was real. We need liquidity, I said, keeping my voice low. I made a call this morning. I had contacted Ruth, my old driver from the trucking days. She was managing a facility called Brightspan Storage now. Ruth was rough around the edges, but she was loyal to the bone. Ruth is going to liquidate the equipment I still have in storage, I told Nina. The old trailers, the spare parts inventory. She knows how to move them fast for cash. It should bring in about $60,000 by the end of the week. Deposit it directly into the foundation account. That evening, alone in my room, the adrenaline faded, leaving room for a cold, gnawing ache. I looked at the picture of Jacob on my nightstand, the one I had insisted on bringing. He was 5 years old in the photo, missing a front tooth, grinning as he held up a fish he had caught. Was I a monster? Was I betraying my own flesh and blood? He was my son. I had carried him, fed him, protected him from the world. A soft knock interrupted my spiral. It was Olivia. She had finished her shift at the hospital and come straight here, carrying a Tupperware container. I made gumbo, she said, setting it down on the tray table. And I know that look on your face. Maggie, am I doing the right thing? Olivia, I asked, my voice cracking. He is my son. Olivia pulled up a chair and took my hand. Her grip was warm and solid. Honey, let me tell you something, she said, her voice firm. You are not destroying this family. You are just stopping them from destroying you. You are taking the knife out of their hands before they can stab you again. She was right. The doubt evaporated. 2 days later, Nina returned with the final piece of the puzzle. She had executed a complex property transfer. My house in Northwood, the one Jacob was so eager to sell, was now the property of the Long Road Foundation. However, the deed included a lifetime estate clause. I had the legal right to live there until my last breath. Jacob could not sell it. He could not leverage it. It belonged to the mission now. That night, the hallway was dark. From the room next door, I heard the thin, wavering voice of an old woman calling out, Sarah, Sarah. Are you there? Please come pick me up. I want to go home. There was no answer, just the hum of the ventilation system. I lay in the narrow bed, the sheets stiff and smelling of bleach. I reached under my pillow and pulled out the file folder containing the foundation documents. I held it against my chest, feeling the sharp corners dig into my skin. It was not just paper. It was a shield. It was a sword. You want me to disappear? I whispered into the darkness, my eyes dry and focused. Fine. I will be a ghost. But I will be the kind that haunts you. Jacob and Kayla finally came to visit me at Pinewood 3 days after I moved in. They brought a bouquet of supermarket carnations that were already starting to brown at the edges and a box of fancy pastries from a bakery in downtown Brookside. I accepted them with a shaky smile, noting the expiration date on the bottom of the box. They had expired 7 days ago. It was the perfect gift from my children, flashy on the outside, rotten on the inside. Jacob wasted no time. He sat on the edge of my bed, smoothing his tie, while Kayla stood by the window, checking her watch every 30 seconds. Mom, Jacob started, pulling a thick stack of documents from his briefcase. We need to settle this. These are just standard papers for financial management. It is just to make sure the bills get paid on time so you do not have to worry. You know how overwhelmed you get. I took the pen he offered. my hand trembling intentionally. I looked at the papers, letting my eyes lose focus. Is this for the electric bill? I asked, my voice thin and wavering. I think I paid that in. Was it 1999? Jacob exchanged a look with Kayla. It was a look of relief. They bought it. They thought the strong, sharp mother who raised them was gone, replaced by a confused old woman. Yes. Mom, Jacob said, his voice dripping with condescending patience. It is just like the electric bill. Just sign right here. I need my reading glasses, I muttered, patting my pockets. I left them in the other room. I will get a nurse to find them, Jacob said, standing up and marching out of the room. The moment the door clicked shut, the dynamic in the room shifted. Kayla stepped away from the window and leaned over me. The smell of her expensive perfume was suffocating. Just sign it when he gets back. Maggie, she whispered, her voice like a serpent's hiss. Stop dragging this out. If you do not sign, we cannot help you. Then, thinking I was too far gone to understand, she turned her back to me and muttered to herself, unaware of the small, motion-activated camera Nina had hidden inside the alarm clock on my nightstand. We need her to sign today, Kayla whispered to the empty air, her hands clenching into fists, before she gives it all away to some charity. Everything will be ours if she just signs. I stared at her back, my expression blank, but inside, I was smiling. Got you. Nina showed me the footage later that evening. This is gold. Maggie, she said. But do not play your hand yet. Let them get arrogant. Let them think they have won. 2 days later. Kayla escalated the game. She organized a family meeting right there in the Pinewood conference room. But it was not just family. She brought Father Albright from St. Albright's Church and a man named Mr. Sterling, who was introduced as a senior care consultant, but was actually a shark from Redstone Family Advisors. The atmosphere was heavy with staged concern. Kayla dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. Father, Kayla said, her voice trembling theatrically. We are just so worried. Mom has been different. We think she is being influenced by bad actors. Maybe the staff here, or that new friend of hers. We fear she is being manipulated into giving away her savings. Father Albright nodded solemnly. Maggie, your children only want what is best for God's plan for you. Stewardship of your assets is a heavy burden. Mr. Sterling chimed in, sliding the guardianship papers across the mahogany table again. Mrs. Rowan, this protects you from predators. It is the only logical choice. I looked at the 3 men and the woman who had evicted me from her life. I decided the show was over. I sat up straighter, the tremor in my hands vanishing instantly. My eyes locked onto Mr. Sterling's with a clarity that made him blink. Actually, Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice steady and commanding, ringing through the quiet room. According to Colorado Revised Statutes, Title 15, Article 14, a court will only grant guardianship if the respondent is incapacitated and there are no less restrictive means available. Since I have already voluntarily assigned a durable power of attorney to a third party, your petition is legally baseless. The silence that followed was absolute. Father Albright's mouth hung open. Kayla stopped dabbing her eyes, her face going pale. What Jacob stammered. Mom, what are you saying? I am saying that I am not signing, I said, pushing the papers back across the table. And regarding your fear of me being manipulated, if I was smart enough to earn every single dollar in those accounts while you were playing video games, Jacob, then I am smart enough to decide who is not worthy of touching it. Jacob shot out of his chair, his face turning a violent shade of red. The mask of the concerned son shattered. You, he sputtered, his hands shaking. You are doing this on purpose. You are trying to humiliate us. We need that money. And there it is, I said softly. This meeting is over, Nina announced, stepping into the room from the hallway where she had been listening. She dropped a folder on the table. I am filing an emergency motion with the court immediately. We are citing this attempt to coerce a signature as evidence of undue influence and potential elder abuse. Kayla looked from me to Nina, her eyes wide with terror. I just smiled. A cold, hard smile that promised winter had only just begun. The leaves had turned brown and fallen, and the air in Brookside was biting again by the time we finally stepped into the county courthouse. It was late November, and the sky outside was a flat, oppressive grey. Inside, Courtroom 4 was not grand like they show on television. It smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, decorated only by a tired-looking American flag and a portrait of a judge who looked like he had been dead for 20 years. Jacob stood at the podium in his best charcoal suit, looking every inch the heartbroken, dutiful son. He kept glancing at me with a practiced look of pity that made my stomach churn. "Your Honor," Jacob said, his voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. "It breaks my heart to drag my mother through this, but she is slipping away. Last month, she wrote a check for $500 to a magazine subscription she already has. She forgets to turn off the stove. I just want to make sure she is safe and her resources are preserved for her care." I sat next to Nina, my hands folded on the table. I did not look at him. I looked at the judge, a woman in her 50s named Judge Halloway, who had dark circles under her eyes and looked like she had heard every lie ever told in this county. Nina stood up. She did not use flowery language. She simply laid down Dr. Aris's report, which confirmed I was cognitively sharper than most people half my age. Then, she pulled out a tablet. "We would like to submit Exhibit C," Nina said calmly. "Video evidence from Mrs. Rowan's room at Pinewood Serenity Care." The video played. The audio was tinny, but clear. It was the recording of Kayla whispering, "Everything will be ours if she just signs." The courtroom went quiet. Jacob stiffened, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the podium. Judge Halloway leaned forward, peering over her spectacles at me. "Mrs. Rowan," she said, her voice raspy. "Why are you resisting this guardianship so strongly? Your son claims he only wants to help." I stood up. My legs felt strong. "Because, Your Honor," I said, looking directly at the judge, "this is not love. This is a hostile takeover disguised as filial duty. They do not want to care for me. They want to liquidate me." Jacob lost his composure. The mask slipped, revealing the desperate, greedy man beneath. "That is absurd," he shouted, turning toward the bench. "She is paranoid, and even if she is lucid, she is being vindictive. She does not need that much money. How long does she have left, anyway? 5 years, and we have a future to build." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Jacob realized what he had said and clamped his mouth shut, but the words hung in the air like smoke. Judge Halloway slowly took off her glasses. Petition denied, she said, her gavel coming down with a dull thud. Mr. Rowan, the court recognizes your mother's full autonomy, and let me be clear, if I see one more attempt to pressure this woman financially, I will personally recommend an investigation into elder abuse. We walked out of the courtroom, Nina beaming with victory. But as we reached the lobby, Kayla intercepted us. She looked frantic, her hair slightly disheveled. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my coat. You think you won? Kayla hissed, her eyes wild. Do not forget who raised Mason. Do not forget who he listens to. You think he will choose a crazy old grandmother over his own parents. If you keep this up, you will never see him again. She let go and stormed off after Jacob, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. I stood there, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and cold clarity. They were using my grandson as a weapon now. It was their last card. Maggie Nina asked gently, "Are you okay?" "I am tired of playing defense." "Nina?" I said, watching the revolving doors spin. "I am tired of blocking their punches. I want to throw one that ends the fight." We drove back to Pinewood in silence. The snow had started to fall, dusting the windshield. When we sat in my small room, Nina pulled out her calendar. "We need to launch the foundation publicly," Nina said. "We need to make it so big and so loud that they cannot touch you without looking like monsters to the entire community." "When do you want to do it?" I looked at the wall calendar. My eyes drifted to the end of the month, December 24th. I said. Nina looked up. "Christmas Eve. That is poetic. It will be exactly 1 year since they told me I was not family." I said. I picked up a red marker and drew a thick circle around the date. My hand did not shake. "If they chose that night to bury me," I said, my voice low and final, "then I will choose that night to bury their greed." 2 weeks before Christmas, the fragile facade of my son's life finally crumbled. I heard the news not from Jacob, but from the local business section of the newspaper. Jacob had been fired from West River Connect. Apparently, he had made a series of high-risk financial decisions in a desperate attempt to cover personal losses. It turned out my daughter-in-law, Kayla, had been living a double life of luxury items and secret, failed investments. They were drowning in credit card debt, and the lifeboat they had planned to use my assets had sailed away. My phone began to ring incessantly. It was Jacob. I never picked up. Every single call was automatically forwarded to Nina's voicemail. One snowy afternoon, a hoodied figure knocked on my door at Pinewood. It was Mason. At 17 years old, he looked like he carried the weight of the world on his slumped shoulders. He sat in the plastic chair, twisting his hands. "Grandma," he said, his voice cracking. I have been avoiding you. I was ashamed." "Ashamed of what?" "Mason?" I asked gently. He looked down at his sneakers. "I heard Mom and Dad talking a few months ago, before all this legal stuff started. Dad was worried about money, and Mom said," she said. He took a shaky breath. She said, "We just have to wait for her to die. It cannot take that long." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to remain steady for him. "I felt sick," Mason whispered, tears spilling over. "I did not want to be part of that family anymore." "You are not them, Mason," I said firmly, "and you do not have to be like them. I am starting a foundation, the Long Road Foundation. I need volunteers to help sort donations. Come see what real strength looks like." A few days later, A desperate Kayla appeared at Pinewood. But she was not alone. She dragged along a woman I had never met, her mother. Denise. Denise was a small, withered woman in a faded coat, looking uncomfortable and out of place. I knew the story vaguely. Kayla had left home at 18 and rarely looked back, sending only a token check on New Year's Day. Kayla looked frantic. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Maggie. Please. We are losing everything. The house, the cars. We have nowhere to go. Even my mother agrees. Families help each other. She nudged Denise, expecting the older woman to plead her case. Denise looked at me, then at her daughter. There was a lifetime of fatigue in her eyes. I told her I would come listen, Denise said, her voice raspy from years of smoking. But I told her on the ride over that I remember what she said to me 5 years ago when I asked for help with my rent. Kayla froze. Mom, don't. Denise turned to her daughter, ignoring the plea. You told me. You are just a debt. Mom, not a family member. You said I was a bad investment. The silence in the room was suffocating. The symmetry was chilling. Kayla had done to me exactly what she had done to her own mother. She had learned to view parents as commodities, and when we ceased to be profitable, she discarded us. Kayla began to sob, a jagged, ugly sound. I was scared. I did not want to be poor like you. Mum, I did not want to struggle. I thought it was how you survive. I looked at her. For a second, I saw the terrified girl beneath the designer clothes. I understood the cycle of trauma, but understanding is not the same as permission. Kayla, look at me, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut through her tears. Your pain is not a license to push me into the same hole you crawled out of. I stood up and walked over to the window. I am not giving you money. That would only feed the disease. But if you want to learn how to work, really work, Ruth might have a shift open at the storage facility. Kayla stared at me in horror, as if manual labor was a death sentence. She turned and ran out of the room, unable to face the reality of her choices. Denise did not follow her. Instead, she stood there, clutching her purse. She looked at the brochures for the Long Road Foundation scattered on my table. This foundation, Denise said slowly. Is it for people like us, old women, whose kids think we are expired goods? That is exactly who it is for. I replied. I have time, Denise said, straightening her coat. I have a lot of time, and I know how to listen. We shook hands. In that moment, an unlikely alliance was formed. I watched from the window as Kayla stood alone in the parking lot. She looked up at the building, shivering in the cold. Her mother was inside signing up to volunteer. Her mother-in-law was stripping her of her inheritance. Her son was disgusted by her. For the first time in her life, Kayla was truly realizing the weight of her own words. She was the one who was not family anymore. The small chapel in Northwood smelled of pine needles, floor wax, and damp wool. It was a stark contrast to the scent of expensive cinnamon candles that had choked me exactly 1 year ago. There were no crystal goblets or catered roasts here. Instead, we had a lopsided tree decorated with popcorn strings and a gathering of women in threadbare coats who held styrofoam cups of cider like they were precious chalices. A young reporter from the Brookside Chronicle, a boy who looked barely out of college, sat in the front row with a recording device. He was there to cover the launch of the Long Road Foundation. I stepped up to the wooden podium. I did not have a prepared speech. I did not need one. My name is Maggie, I said into the microphone, my voice steady. For 25 years, I drove 18-wheelers across this country. I hauled steel and timber while the rest of the world slept. I missed birthdays. I missed school plays. I did it because I thought I was building a fortress for my family. I paused, looking at the faces of the women in the audience. Denise, Nora, June. They nodded back at me. But last Christmas, I continued. I learned that a fortress can become a prison if the people inside it only value the bricks, not the builder. I was told I was a liability. I was told I was no longer family because I was getting old. I stood in the snow with nothing. Tonight, I stand here to make sure no other woman has to freeze. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the back of the church creaked open. A gust of wind blew in, carrying a few snowflakes. Heads turned. Jacob, Kayla, and Mason stood in the doorway. They were late. They looked out of place in their designer coats against the backdrop of peeling paint and second-hand pews. Jacob looked haggard, his eyes scanning the room with a mix of arrogance and fear. They had not come to celebrate. They had seen the announcement in the paper and come to manage the damage. The reporter, sensing the tension, stood up. He looked from me to the newcomers. "Are those your children, Mrs.?" Rowan, the reporter, asked, his pen poised over his notebook. "Is your family here to support the foundation?" Before I could answer, Kayla stepped forward. She looked brittle, as if one touch would shatter her into a million sharp pieces. "We are not involved," Kayla snapped, her voice shrill in the quiet church. She made her choice. She chose not to be family anymore. This is all her doing. The room went dead silent. The echo of her words hung in the air, a distorted reflection of the sentence she had sentenced me with last year. "You are not family anymore." But this time, she had said it in front of witnesses. She had said it to the press. I did not get angry. I did not cry. I looked at her with a profound sadness. "That is interesting," I said into the microphone, my tone soft but amplified to fill every corner of the room. "Because I learned something this year. Kayla, family are the people who do not sell you to pay their debts. If the people in this room do not see me as a burden, then I do not need to force you to accept the title of daughter." The reporter's eyes widened. He started scribbling furiously. "Mrs. Rowan, are you implying that your son's financial situation is related to the creation of this trust?" Jacob stepped forward, panic flashing in his eyes. He saw the headline forming in real time. He saw his reputation in Brookside turning to ash. No, Jacob said, holding up his hands and forcing a strained laugh. "This is just a misunderstanding. Emotions are high. Mom, Maggie is a saint. We need to speak privately. There are matters to discuss." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. It was the look of a man who realized he was standing on a trap door. "Private matters," Jacob hissed, stepping toward the aisle. I looked at the reporter, then at the women who were watching me with bated breath. I could have destroyed him right there. I could have listed his debts, his lies, and his cruelty. But that was not why we were here. The Long Road Foundation is about the future, I said to the reporter, effectively dismissing my son. It is about ensure dignity is not a line item in a budget. I stepped down from the podium. The applause was polite but subdued. The tension was too thick for celebration. In the back, I said to Jacob as I passed him, 5 minutes. As the service wound down and the lights in the main hall were dimmed, The four of us moved toward the small vestry room behind the altar. The heavy door clicked shut behind us, cutting off the sound of Silent Night being hummed by the choir. There were no witnesses now, no cameras, just a scarred wooden table, 4 people, and the ghosts of a Christmas past that was about to be buried forever. The vestry was freezing. The heating vents did not reach back here, and the only sound in the room was the aggressive ticking of a plastic clock on the wall and the wind rattling the single-pane window. Jacob slumped into a metal folding chair, burying his face in his hands. "Mom," he said, his voice muffled and broken. "I lost my job. I did not want to tell you like this, but we are drowning. We need money. We are family. You cannot just watch us sink." I looked at him, feeling a strange detachment, the urge to fix it, the maternal reflex that had driven me to work double shifts for 20 years, was gone. It had been cauterized by a year of betrayal. I reached into my bag and pulled out 3 crisp copies of the legal documents Nina had finalized that morning. I spread them out on the scarred wooden table like a royal flush. "It is already done, Jacob," I said calmly. "The deed to the Northwood house has been transferred to the Long Road Foundation. My investment accounts have been liquidated and reallocated to the trust. I have kept a small annuity for my own medical care. That is it. There is nothing left to give." Kayla stared at the papers, her face twisting into a mask of pure venom. She slammed her hand on the table. "You are sick," she screamed. "You destroyed your own son's future just because your feelings were hurt. Because of one comment, you are a cruel, vindictive old woman." "Cruelty," I replied. My voice thin but sharp as a razor wire, is turning a mother into an ATM and calling it family tradition. Cruelty is waiting for me to die so you can upgrade your lifestyle. I was not done. I pulled out one last file folder. This one was thinner, but it was the deadliest. Nina had dug deep into their finances during the discovery phase of the guardianship hearing. "You keep blaming me for your debts," I said, looking at Jacob. "You think you are broke because I stopped writing checks. But that is not the truth." I slid the file toward him. "Open it," I commanded. Jacob opened the folder. His eyes scanned the bank statements Nina had flagged. "What is K. Lux Consulting?" Jacob asked, confusion knitting his brow. "It is a shell company," I explained. "Kayla set it up 3 years ago. She has been draining your retirement accounts and maxing out credit cards to fund illegal investment schemes and luxury purchases. She lost over $80,000 last year alone. I did not make you poor. Jacob, your wife did." The silence that followed was deafening. Jacob turned slowly to look at Kayla. She shrank back against the wall, her face draining of color. You said the market crashed," Jacob whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "I was trying to fix it." Kayla shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "I just needed more capital. If your mother had just signed the papers, I could have paid it all back." The explosion was instant. They turned on each other with the ferocity of starving wolves. Accusations flew. Secrets about hidden credit cards and gambling apps spilled out into the cold air. I stood back, watching the fire burn. I was no longer the villain in their narrative. I was just a witness to their self-destruction. When they finally fell silent, exhausted and panting, I stepped forward. I placed a single silver key on the table. It was the key to the house in Northwood. "This is the only thing I ever wanted to give you. I said softly. A safe home, a place to land. But you chose to turn it into a battlefield. I looked at Mason, who had been standing in the corner the entire time, his arms wrapped around himself. There is no inheritance, I announced. Not for Jacob. Not for Kayla. The only person with a name in the trust is Mason. Kayla's head snapped up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. But, I continued, locking eyes with my grandson, it is strictly a scholarship fund. It goes directly to the university. Not a penny goes to living expenses. Not a penny goes to parents. You have to stand on your own 2 feet. Mason! Mason wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his coat. He looked at his parents, then at me. He nodded. I will take it. Grandma, Mason said, his voice steady. I do not want the rest. I do not want to end up like this. He looked at his parents. If you guys need money, maybe you should just get jobs. That sentence hung in the air, final and absolute. The cycle was broken. I turned and walked to the door. I did not look back. I stepped out of the vestry and into the main hall of the church. The lights were dim, casting long shadows across the empty pews. I pushed open the heavy front doors and stepped out into the night. The snow was falling softly, covering the dirty slush of the parking lot with a fresh, clean layer of white. I wrapped my scarf tighter around my neck and inhaled the sharp, cold air. It burned my lungs, but it felt like life. Exactly 1 year ago, they had exiled me from their family. They had thrown me out into the cold to die. But tonight, I was walking away by choice. I was leaving with my name, my voice, and the absolute power to decide who earned the title of family. The heavy church door clicked shut behind me. It did not sound like a slam. It sounded like the final turn of a lock, sealing the past away forever. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So drop your location in the comments below and let's get a conversation started. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, and smash that hype button so we can get this message out to more people who need to hear it.